Hi everybody, it's Orsina Amsler, and like many of you, I am stuck at home because of the coronavirus outbreak. There's no school for the foreseeable future, and so I thought this would be a good time to make a new tutorial. So today we're going to be doing this lesson. This is done by one of my 7th graders, and it's a watercolor lesson, birch trees, as you can see. And the inspiration for this was this painting by Dean Krauser, and we're going to be using masking tape to kind of flesh out the trees in our painting. There are a lot of tutorials online about how to do masking tape birch trees. You know, I did not invent this technique, but I have done it with my students throughout the different seasons. We've done fall themes, we've done winter themes. If you check my website out, you can find some different versions, but it's spring and we're going to be doing a spring themed one. So get ready, it's going to be fun. Let's review what you're going to need for this lesson. So it's a watercolor lesson, so of course we need watercolor paints. This is a great student grade quality paint that I use in my middle school classroom. Prang, oval, pan, 16 colors. About $6 on Amazon if you don't already have some at home. Brushes, you don't need this many, maybe just the big one and maybe a smaller one for details later will be fine. Of course, water, and I always like to have a paper towel handy and some scrap paper. An ebony pencil or a black colored pencil will be required, and of course masking tape to create our trees, and watercolor paper. Okay, so let's talk about the tape and the watercolor paper. The purpose of the tape, as you can see here, is we're gonna create a tree form, paint over it, and then when the painting is dry, we're gonna be able to remove the masking tape to reveal the beautiful white birch underneath. This is the paper that this is done on, is this high quality Birches watercolor paper, cold press. This sample was done on a student grade paper, and as you can see, the paper fuzzed a little bit when I removed the tape. So whatever you have at home, I recommend trying this technique, like doing a little test painting before you commit to something that you may be disappointed with when the tape shreds the paper when you try to remove it. So maybe do a little test painting before you do your actual painting. Okay, let's get started. Okay, we are going to start this video by drawing our tape trees, and I call it drawing because, you know, pencil and pens aren't the only things you can draw with. All right, this example that I showed you earlier is a vertical composition, and just for fun, I'm gonna do a horizontal composition, so either orientation works. Okay, now, very important, you're gonna make however many trees you want, but we are going to be sort of zoomed in the forest here, and whether or not your trees go off the bottom of the page is going to be optional. This student did. I will show you an alternative, but definitely your trees are going to go off the top. And this kind of creates the illusion that we are in the forest close to these trees as opposed to being far away. If you try to show the tops of the trees, it's going to be difficult to taper them enough to look realistic. So plan on having your trees go off the top of the page. I'm going to begin by laying down a piece of masking tape to be a trunk, and I'm going to show you that we are not going to go off the bottom with this tree. I'm going to use my fingers to hold that tape down, to just press that tape down. When I do this lesson in my classroom, I tell my students that just relying on this 1-inch, very mechanical straight edge of the tape is going to not create a natural looking tree. So instead, I'm going to tear the tape and use the torn edges, just overlap as needed. I'm going to use the torn edges to be a more organic type of edge for the tree. So as you can see here, I'm going to just layer these pieces, and I'm going to think about the fact that I want my tree to be wider as it comes down, and I'm going to just fill in gaps as needed. So I have a nice solid tree trunk that totally protects the paper and uses nice torn edges to create a more organic and natural form. Feel free to go off the edge of the paper if you need to. Okay. Once you have a trunk in place, you can use smaller pieces like this to create a few side branches. This technique I'm a little less particular about, maybe showing a straight edge. We will be drawing some additional branches with the ebony pencil, so you really don't need more than 2 or 3. I usually have reference pictures on hand, so if you're doing this at home, you definitely want to be looking at some pictures of trees to kind of think about how do these branches come out from the tree trunk, generally at kind of a angle facing upward, and they're going to be tapering out and getting thinner as they move away from the trunk itself. So there's one tree. I'm going to keep building some trees here. Okay, at this point I have 3 trees kind of fleshed out here. So I want you to notice that this tree is a little bit thicker and also lower, slightly lower than this one. So this is a way that you can sort of show some depth, is that if your trees that are higher up in your picture plane are thinner, they're going to appear a little bit more in the distance, whereas your trees that are lower in the picture plane can be a little bit wider to imply that they are closer. The other thing I want to mention is you may be tempted to try to flatten your tape down with a tool like the handles of a pair of scissors or a ruler. But what I'm going to tell you is just use your fingertips, because we want to not stick this tape so much to the paper that it's really going to present a difficulty later when we want to remove it. We want it to protect the paper from the paint, but still be easy to remove. So we're ready to paint. Okay, before we start painting, I want to point out that I made a couple adjustments to these trees. First of all, I used some small pieces to sort of round out the bottoms of the trees where I felt like the little multiple edges of tape were making it look unrealistic. I also took away a side branch that was here, and I added a couple places where the branches fork out, you know, kind of just split naturally. And you can feel free to use scissors to help you cut those little small pieces of tape. Okay, so we're ready to paint. Since I'm showing the tree trunks, the bottom of my trees, and even if I don't, you want to start by drawing a little horizon line. And you want to keep this, for this painting, we're going to kind of keep it pretty close to the bottom, maybe a third or a quarter of the way up, and just make sure that all of the bottoms of your trees are falling below that line. We're going to start by painting the upper background. Now, with watercolor, a technique that I do for most of my watercolor lessons is we are going to pre-wet the paper using a large brush, because we want to be able to work quickly. I'm going to just keep dipping my brush in water. I know it's kind of off camera. I have a small workspace here in terms of what the scope of what is seen in the phone camera. But you don't really need to see the water. You just need to know that I'm dipping my brush in there a lot to really saturate these blank background areas. The purpose of the water is to allow the paint to blend softly and to float a little bit before sinking into the paper and becoming, you know, permanent. Painting on dry paper the paper will just suck up the paint and you will not have as much flexibility, but wetting the paper first allows you to do some really nice blending. I'm gonna go in with some yellow green, and I'm gonna just put in some big splotches of yellow green. Now, if you've worked with watercolors before, you know that the more you stir up the color, the more saturated and bright it's going to be, because there will be more paint in the mix. And the less you stir up the paint, or the more water you have in the brush, the lighter the color will be. So you can control the saturation of the color and the intensity of the color by how much water you have in the mix. And you can use the lid of the paint box to help you control that. I'm now gonna go in with some of the darker green color, and I'm gonna add some areas of dark green, and I'm just allowing the two areas to mix.